Welcome, everybody. My name is Tim Kaltenbach from the Tennessee Native Plant Society, and tonight is our November seminar, November 18th, 2025. And before we start, I wanted to mention that we have a new page on the website for volunteer opportunities. I don't know if everyone knows, but we're up to about 800 members right now, and we're an all volunteer organization that's having an important impact on the people and the environment in Tennessee and doing all our activities, educating the public, exploring natural habitats, assisting with schools and students, protecting habitats and native plant areas, requires kind of a lot of work, and we're expanding all the things we do. And so we created this new webpage, or a new page for the website um, listing all of the opportunities where the members can join in and take an active role. And you just want to go to tnps.org and on the top, click on volunteer. We have slots for all kinds of things. I think there are 12 different items. We've got social media, writing, mentoring, photography, event organizing, and then we need help with tech items, such as operating our Dropbox account, running the website, and then the membership portal. So that's something to think about if you're interested in doing something more and meeting people and making new friends. That could be a great place to start. And so tonight, I want to introduce our speaker. He is Steve Slack, and Steve is the owner of Keystone Flora Native Plant Nursery in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I had the pleasure of visiting Keystone Flora last summer. I was driving through and stopped in. And I have to say, it's a really impressive place. It is, I think, what, 4 acres, 3 or 4 acres,
Uh,
Steve?
Three and a half.
Three and a half in the heart of Cincinnati, not too far from the famous zoo. And you can't even believe you're in the city. You drive down long winding lane through the countryside and arrive at the nursery, and you think you're in the middle of nowhere, but you're right near the core of Cincinnati. And it's a beautiful place with different habitats, forests, open meadows, and the plantings are beautiful. And then there are the greenhouses, and it's a really cool place. So Steve is a native of Los Angeles and attended Glendale College and the University of California at Santa Barbara. And he has been interested in native plants for decades. When he moved to San Francisco, he jumped in with the California Native Plant Society and also was a restoration volunteer in one of the chapters there in Yerba Buena. And then in '94, he moved to Cincinnati and jumped into the native plant scene there with the wild ones, Cincinnati Parks, and the Cincinnati Wildflower and Preservation Society. And then in 2007, he co-founded Keystone Flora Native Plants. And in 2019, he became the sole owner. And Steve has many, many years of background in growing, propagating, running the nursery, and understands a lot of the science and the ins and outs of native plants. So I'm going to turn it over to him. Steve, welcome. We're very glad to have you tonight.
Thanks, Tim. Welcome, everybody. It's an honor to speak to you. Uh, yeah, when I was in San Francisco and volunteering there, I realized that I could barely see a native landscape without it being infected with invasive species. Everywhere you would look, you would see invasives, and um, I mean, it's certainly a crisis that's affecting, I guess, many countries as well as our own. So it's so important to, pay attention to our species in our local natural areas, the ones that are left. And I just hope we stop destroying quality habitats because uh, once they're gone, they're gone. And that's one of the missions of Keystone Flora is can humans actually restore uh, uh, a healthy native environment after eliminating invasive species? And so that takes up a lot of my time. So um, yeah, I moved to Ohio in '94. I didn't know any plants here. And in fact, in California, I didn't know many plants either. It's hard for me to remember the names of the plants, but it took a while. And once the door opened up into mind, I started remembering things. And uh, a hobby turned into a small business. And here we are. So yeah, and yeah, so we're going to talk about the nursery and just kind of go through some of our things we've dealt with. And if anybody has any questions, I'm sure we're going to be answering them at the end, but it doesn't bother me if somebody needs to know something right away. You want to chime in and ask a question, go for it. So we, first of all, in Ohio, here's Cincinnati down here, and you can see my cursor okay, you guys?
Yes.
Um, you can see we have this kind of soil situation here, but where a lot of our plants that I got came from is here in Adams County, where you can see where there's three major soil zones uh, that pinch right here at the southern Ohio. This is an extremely rich area with a lot of diversity, and it's really a go-to place for us. From here to here, it's about 95 miles, and there's other very rich areas in the state, and I certainly haven't been around the state as much as I'd like to, but this area I go to a lot, and we have similar soils, so a lot of our seed sources have come from here. Um, and we've got a couple from Kentucky, a few sources from Indiana, and anyway, that's this is the place to go right here. And so here's an example of one of the prairies. This is the Wright-Patterson airfield where the Wright brothers experimented with flying back in the day. And there are some people there. It's a military base, and some people were there, and they saw some native species and said, "Hey, this is a very nice environment you got there." And so they started saving seeds and propagating here. So they took local sources and made it larger. And oh, it's a wonderful prairie, uh, as you can see. And it's I think they're still working on it. When we went there, I couldn't get out because the road closed because they were having shotgun practice up there somewhere, and I had to get out of the Air Force Base, and I was afraid of getting in trouble. So anyway, it's well guarded, yeah, but you can get in there and see things. And another one of the excellent example of a Ohio prairie is a Bigelow Cemetery, which is in the Darby Plains, and it's a savanna where the cemetery kind of is on a raised spot because it's so wet there. They buried their dead on a higher ground. And so a lot of plants survive there, where all around is agriculture. There's another nice area up in this area called Silver King, which has a lot of native plants in it as well. And then the bur oaks, it's a plain, it's a very flat area, and with still some quality bur oaks. It's a great savanna example, uh, or used to be. And so, yeah, we go on a lot of different hikes to learn different areas. This is called the Devil's Backbone. This is out there in just north of Adams County. And this is one of our leaders of the Cincinnati Wildflower Preservation Society, looking at some cliff ecology. And this is a place called it's a cedar bog, it's called, but it's not a bog, it's a fen. So bogs clog and fens flush. And so this is a fen, so water oozes out of the ground. And here there's lady slippers and the Massasauga rattlesnake. And it's a very rich area and it needs restoration. And they've got a boardwalk going all through it. This area is valued to the point where it stopped a highway project from going right through it. People defended the place and they were able to stop a highway that was going to go right through this place. And of course, in Cincinnati is 10% of the land area in Cincinnati is parks. And parks don't have a lot of money for restoration. A lot of it's been let go. And so many of the parks have serious invasive species problems. And so here's a group called Northside Green Space that has been doing restoration work for 30 years. And they have eliminated a lot of the non-native plants, and the local community has actually worked in their local area and done a really good job. And then they have regular meetings, and they're a nonprofit. And so the parks can't do it. The people have stepped in and started doing it. And so now other parks are starting to emulate what Northside Green Space has started. And so there's restoration events going on in different parks because people are starting to understand we're losing our biological health in a lot of our parks. And so we've got the bones, and it's interesting. Once you eliminate the non-native species, a lot of native species show up because they're just there waiting. And so over the years, we've witnessed a lot of good restoration. There's a picture of my dad next to this white oak tree that's in Spring Grove Cemetery, which is near Keystone, Flora. There's over 90 miles of roadway in this cemetery. It's very old. Presidents are buried there, famous people. And I'm including this picture because you can see the size of that tree. And I was there one day and I saw a gentleman with a seed picker upper tool, which is a little spring ball on a thing. And he can pick up oak tree seeds and put them in a bucket. And he had a whole bunch of different 5-gallon buckets full of seeds from this tree that he's going to sell to Nursery. So this is one of the reasons Tim asked me to talk to you guys is I wanted to talk about provenance and having this tree being if the commercial nurseries are concentrating the genotypes of seeds and then shipping those trees out all throughout the land, a lot of the trees are going to be the same genotype. And so I feel like our diversity is going to be suboptimal if if this just happens year after year after year after year, um, because different trees will have different characteristics to deter disease or have different kinds of uh, things built into their genes that makes them different than other things. And um, uh, so it's a philosophical thing that nurseries have to deal with as far as diversity goes. If we just flood the nation with the same tree, um, I just don't think I don't think we're going to be prepared for the future. So we don't know what's going to happen and who's going to survive and who's not going to make it. Um, with global warming, we're having a lot of change with disease and that sort of thing. So, um, Keystone Flora, I've had a couple partners here. This is Diana and Eileen, and this is Bob. But Diana and Eileen and I started Keystone Flora back in 2005. And here we are at a school greenhouse. Here's a school with an unused greenhouse. They had fans and it was very hot in there and pretty messy. And so they actually allowed us to take it over. So the students are right over here in their classes and they could see that people were in here doing stuff. And the school was very nice to let us use this greenhouse. And so anyway, this is the beginnings of Keystone Flora, and this is the way we grew our plants. And what we found though was growing plants indoors, they got spindly, they bloomed early, they were not as healthy as the ones we grow outdoors. And so even though we were able to get things going, um, it was much better to grow them outdoors uh, and with no greenhouse at all. And that's the way we do it at Keystone Flora. We plant our plants and then we put a net over them and let it snow. All of our plants that are in pots, they're outside. It snows on them. We buffer our plants, and um, and I'll have some slides about that later. So anyway, we found this spot in Wooden Shoe Hollow, which Tim was mentioning, and we have about 3 old barns on the place. It's an old growing area for Cincinnati. They used to grow the greens in um, the farms used to grow the greens in cold frames and hotbeds. They'd take them by wagon downtown Cincinnati, and then on the way back up, they'd pick up manure and they would pack their um, raised beds with manure to extend the growing season. And they did that for a couple generations, and they were growing greens in the mid 1800s. And so uh, eventually they moved. There was well, Wooden Shoe Hollow is more than just the valley you were, Tim. It actually goes up the hill a bit too. And so the whole area was called Wooden Shoe Hollow because all the folks came from Germany, Holland area, and they wore wooden shoes. Anyway, they moved to coal-fired underground steam heat, and they grew their vegetables and extended their growing season. And there's still about 6 or 10 of these chimneys around there. Everybody asks about the chimneys when they come in. They thought it was some sort of steel thing or something, but no, it was for growing. These are very tall. Uh, I was at the nursery when this one got struck by lightning one time. We kept working. So anyway, Eileen had some property there, and this is why we started the uh, the business here. It was, as you can see, it was an old donkey pen, it was a pig pen, and it was a chicken house. So this structure has a little bit of history to it. But Diana and Eileen and I, with some help with our spouses, started cleaning up. And we have invasive honeysuckle all over the place in Cincinnati, and that's what a lot of that is. And so we started working on it, getting things in shape, and we started growing stuff in the ground. I would never recommend this technique to anybody because the mulch and the leaves and things get on top of there, and all of a sudden you've got this stuff buried in your land. And this was a big mistake. So this is one of our mistakes. Even though things grew in there, after about 5 or 6 years, that thing is buried under 6 inches of stuff, and it's hard to get that out. So uh, we learned the hard way at Keystone Flora. Yeah, here's one of our floods. You can see that actually every time it floods through our nursery, the plants don't seem to mind at all. They kind of like it, but it washes our mulch around and stuff. And so this is one of our shrub areas where we grew shrubs. And so we fixed up the little thing. And this is where our shade plants lived here. And you can see this is how we buffer the plants with used pots or boards or leaf bags. And we went to an auction and bought a few of these greenhouses. So we took them apart and put them back together. And we got 3 of those over the years. And then we built a potting shed. And this potting shed, I'd have to tell you, we were going to just have it face the north and shade our employees. But we tweaked it a little bit to the northeast, and that was a good decision because we wanted to keep shade under here as much as we could so people wouldn't have to work in the hot sun. So that the angle of that opening, it was the last minute decision was a good one. So we use peat moss, and we get these flats of 38, and we just put our seeds in there, and then we'd set them on the ground and put a net over them. And we do this in October and November. And the colder it gets, the better those seeds like it. It's called cold stratification. And that's one thing, Tim, if you're getting seeds for woodlands, you got to make sure it goes through that cold stratification. A lot of other nurseries, they do a lot of effort with their refrigeration of their seeds, and they're very meticulous about taking records and storing seeds in refrigerators and that sort of thing. And we don't do that. We'd rather skip that step and just plant them in the fall and put a net over them. And since that's sterile soil, everything grows. And so if you want to get seeds and you want to have success, I would not spread them on the ground. I would grow them artificially, let the roots grow, and then plug them in the next year, and you'll have a greater success rate. There's Eileen. Look at, she's using a feather to tickle the soil. And then this is Jeannie. She used to help us out. And we do the seeding on a nice day in fall. And we could sit around the table. We get to talk and commiserate and things. And so it's always a fun time to do that with a few people. And of course, we have to write down everything and label everything. And so I started propagating shrubs indoors. And, I'd get stem cuttings. And this is one method I tried for a while. I don't do it anymore because it just took over too much space in the house. But then you take the mister and I would mist the leaves on a daily basis, and this keeps it humid in there. And that's another good way to propagate some shrubs by stem cuttings. Then I decided to try one of these bubblers, which this has you have some water in there and a little pump, and it makes mist underneath there. And so I ran this for a couple of years in the house, but I was tired of the noise, and this was just I didn't like it. We don't use it anymore. But we were trying to get efficient about growing stuff, and so this was one of our failures, I'd say. I think somebody could probably make it work better than I did, but just to have that thing running all the time I'd rather have an aquarium, I think. So the nursery grows up, we're in the shade area. We got our greenhouses up there, and you can see how things are kind of evolving. Um, and here, yeah, back here we have ground cover on the ground, but here we put mulch and leaves down here every year. And man, this soil got so nice. In fact, to this day, this is the best soil in the hollow because of all the amending we've done just with leaves and wood chips. And these are spring ephemerals right here. This is a Styloforum diphyllum, which is wood poppy and wild ginger, uh, and Polemonium reptans, which is the Jacob's ladder. And everything does well here. So when there's a plastic ground cover and you put the pots on there, you got that, the little rootlets can get through that ground cover and connect with Mother Earth. And, they can kind of lock in. But when they're here, they're actually touching the earth, and they're able to utilize the microbes and the fungi, and the bacterias, and the friendly nematodes, and all the life that the soil has in it. And so this has worked really well for us here. So there's the ground cover I'm talking about, which makes a nice, neater situation. And the plants grow here fine. Some plants do fine on it, but I know that they would prefer to be touching the soil. And then here, you can see some leftover buffering here. Usually we take that all away before customers come in. And then here, after we planted our plants, we throw a net over everything to keep the leaves and the birds out of it, and the squirrels. Get a lot of squirrel damage probably well, every day this time of year, the squirrels are here digging in my pots. And so we get a lot of squirrel damage. So when we plant our seeds, we want to protect them. And this has worked quite well for us. These are just nets from Tractor Supply. Here's another example of our buffering. I collect leaf bags from the street. And so we want to protect our pots from freezing and thawing out. The temperature, these plants survive these cold temperatures, but you get that cold wind on there and it gets so cold, and then the sun will come out for a few days, and they don't want to be frozen, thaw, frozen, thaw, frozen, thaw. I think that's what wears them out. And I think once they go frozen, you want to keep them frozen. And so the buffering is necessary, and it's a lot of work to set that up and take it down after when spring comes around. Um, and then we get to use the leaves for mulching. So rain gardens is another thing that we like to promote. This is a area across the old nursery was right across the street here. So this was always getting flooded. And so Eileen and Diana dug quite a deep hole. Didn't I don't think it. Well, they decided to dig a fairly deep hole, basically a trench in here, and we planted native plants in there. And so yeah, they got started. This is that is the Rosa palustris there. There's some Iris versicolor, and there's mm, great blue lobelia and things. And so this is, I would say, year 2 or so after we dug it out. And then this is the way it looks like today. And so, and there's the roses in bloom there. And we got one of our sedges here. And that could be Culver's root or something. We have Spirea alba. Um, and so that has mitigated the flooding in that area. Another rain garden we did, well, I ended up, when the partnership split up, I moved the nursery next door to the property next door. And this is a rain garden I started, and I collect 100% of the roof runoff from the roof of the little farmhouse. And this is what it looks like when it's weeded. And then, of course, all these things turn into this sort of thing. So here we've got prairie dropseed and little blue stem here, Asclepias tuberosa. There's Hibiscus moschutos, Spirea alba. There's compass plant, which is the Silphium lacinatum, and some purple coneflower, a gray-headed coneflower. So you can put the, and then there's turtlehead in there and obedient plant, and you can put the wet lovers towards the bottom and then the dry lovers around the edges. So you can create diversity in your own landscape. And this is downhill from my house. There's no neighbors that, if this overflows, there's no neighbors that'll be affected. So worked out pretty good. Back here, this shrub here, that's choke cherry. And then I've got elderberry back here. And so here, so we're standing right next to the road. If your site goes in there, we've got like oh, and there's Queen of the Prairie back here. So we've got the rain garden, Queen of the Prairie, choke cherry. We have like 4 dimensions. That is your viewing site. And so I was standing there and accidentally I saw that. I didn't really realize that's what happened. So this is the little farmhouse where that's right next door to that nursery shack that we had before. And this is where I moved the nursery in 2019. And this is the field where I've got 3.5 acres. So this is called sheet mulching. And we put down plastic to kill the weeds. Wooden Shoe Hollow has excellent soil. There's a stream back here. So this might have, before the old farmers took this area over, this might have been more of a riparian area, but they cleared it and they put drain tiles in all over the place. Nobody knows where they go or where they come from. But uh, anyway, this is great soil. And they used to bring in all that manure over those years. And so turns out weeds really like good soil. So we have extremely high weed pressure. And so this is how I started the prairie garden, and save yourself some work and do this for about just under a year. And then you won't have to take out all those roots. And so here is that area the next year. And here we started smothering the next area. So this area was done in four 4 years, and we planted everything the first week of July when it was hot and humid. So by putting down cardboard and a thin layer of wood chips on top, we have smothered the weeds for 3 years.
Mm.
The soil stays moist and cool and soft because rain will create hard pan on bare soil, and then the water won't soak in, it'll run off. So by doing this technique, and we plant when it's really hot and humid, you would think people would, when's the best time to plant a plant? Well, in the hot 95-degree humid weather. Well, that's what we do. And it worked perfectly. And you can see here, this is a year later after we put in plugs of plants right here. So if you can plant a plug and plant it the next year, your plants will be full size. So I think what happens is the roots stay cool and moist in that heat, and the leaves, the plants love heat and humidity. So the leaves are really happy. The roots are happy. And so things grow very well for us like that. This is the first year planting here, and see we're expanding the prairie here. Now, one more year, next year, we'll be working this area. This is the previous year. So this was planted, oh gosh, yeah, this was probably the end of the season when we planted this. So this will probably be late in the summer, later in the summer. And this is what it looks like today. This is what I call the pocket prairie here. Here I did not sheet mulch, and that's full of weeds. I have to go in there with the weed whip. There's a lot, this takes much more effort here. Here we put in the cardboard and the wood chips, and there's hardly any weeds in there. And we planted everything 1.5 to 2 feet apart, and it seemed to cover pretty well. And this will be the 6th year that this area here was planted. This is area the 6th year. There's another different time of year, how it looks. We have a house in town in Cincinnati. This is my front yard. And I have not gotten a ticket yet, but I make sure that the sidewalk doesn't get covered with stuff. And I've witnessed many people stopping and taking pictures, and the kids just love the butterflies. And we got the milkweed in there, and the bergamot, fistulosum, and um, we're representing native plants quite well there, as long as I keep it on the neater side. There's just another picture of one of the beds we had there. This is a ditch where we planted a bunch of plants just up out of the ditch here. The ditch is right along back here. And um, what was all used to be fescue is now productive pollinator friendly plants. This is an installation that the county came in and bought plants and our plants, and they used them for this parking area. And uh, the lady Jennifer that did this landscaping, she really knew what she was doing. And this just this was a big hit. And the county's been coming back year after year now to buy plants from us, even though they have their own nursery. They don't really have they have a seed nursery where we got the plants. And if they need to do an installation, uh, they're not going to go buy seed. They need plants. And so um, they've got a wonderful native nursery, the county, Hamilton County. There's another shot from the other side. That looks like, oh, that's Quarry Mountain Mint. And you can see what's happening out there. McMansions. I like the way she used stones in there. And here she didn't plant as dense as I did at my prairie planting, but I'm sure they go in there and maintain around these plants. Looks like they mulch. This is orange coneflower, Rudbeckia fulgida. This is along the road in Wooden Shoe Hollow. That has never been watered. That just likes it hot and dry. This is Pyramid Hill Sculpture Park. And this is in the north part of the county. And they've been clients for years. And here she's got the prairie drop seed planted as a border. And it's a wonderful park. It's a huge park, hundreds of acres, and they have giant sculptures there. And here's another pollinator garden. So this is basically there's different sections there, different plantings, and this is the native plant area. This is beak grass, Diarrhea americana. I put this picture in there to show winter interest. So it's nice to have something to look at in the winter, even though it's crispy and dry looking. I think this plant can be used ornamentally for sure. And we had blue stem goldenrod planted here and here. This is another prairie planting out at the original nursery here. You can see we started with an open field. We did some sheet mulching. That's a little blue stem back there. And then that's the same spot here with the butterfly weed. And this, when it was mature, this is what it turned into. Thin leaf mountain mint. This is Liatris pycnostachya. Looks like we've got purple coneflower there. We got senna back there, some ironweed. So we have lots of people that visit the nursery. The garden clubs come in. Cincinnati State, Xavier Universities had classes come in there. The garden center rain garden class comes in there to look at our rain gardens. And so they're training people to do things. And so they like to get them out to show them examples. I'm keeping an eye on the clock, Tim. Looks like it's a quarter after.
You're doing great. Yeah, you have more slides, like keep going. Yeah.
Here's one of the crews working in this hot weather. It's 90 degrees and humid out there. And this is one of the teams we had one year. These ladies, they're hard workers. And Morgan here, she still works with me. She's been there for about 4 or 5 years now. She's excellent. All these people have just moved on to this is Andrew, and uh, I never have to look for workers. They want to call me up and they want to work there so bad. Andrew wanted to work for free, and I just like, I can't do that. I got to pay you something. And he did a lot of great work for us. And half the people that come to work for me are they leave really good jobs. He's an IT guy. He made a bunch of money. Has a nice car and everything. He needed to get out and just get into the earth and get into the land. And he worked for me for a year, and he ended up buying a cabin out in the woods and a place where he can take his kids. But we end up training a lot of folks about the benefits of native plants, and they put a lot of work in, and I don't pay them very much, but I don't want people to help me for free either, and they can take that knowledge on the rest of their lives. Yeah, we've had groups come in. This is a group that wanted to have no, they had caterer come out and do this thing for us. Here's one of the garden clubs that came in there, and so we don't charge for it, and hopefully they'll buy a few plants. We basically want to just get people out there. Here's I don't know if this is the Sierra Club. I can't remember. Some group wanted to have a meeting out there. Here's the class from UC Cincinnati. It's Dave Gressley, excellent dude. He worked at Spring Grove Cemetery for years, horticulturalist. Here's a rain garden class. It looks like another one in the rain. And so other topics that we do here at Keystone is we're starting to get into permaculture. If you got the time in the winter and you want to learn about permaculture, I suggest learning it from Bill Mollison, the godfather of the movement. He coined the term permaculture, and that's how you can see his lecture series. And we do hugelkultur. I've done some bee blocks, biochar. Okay, this is coming up. Cover cropping, mothing. Let's look at a few pictures. This is hugelkultur, where we bury logs and organic material underground. That's Cameron. And since we compacted the soil, we're loosening it back up underneath because we don't want it to turn into a bathtub. So these are 50-foot long beds here. And we fill it up with organic material that's just laying around the land, partially decayed. I've never used brand fresh cut before. It's always been kind of aged. Then we put organic material in there, leaves, wood chips, put soil back on top. And there's my Anasazi beans. I grew beans in there that year. So we're off the native plant thing a little bit, but I wanted to tell you about hugelkultur, and that's what it looks like. And everything I grow in these hugel beds really does well. The logs create air down there underneath in the root area, root zone. Well, where does nitrogen come from? Nitrogen's in the air. How are you going to get nitrogen in the soil? Yeah, you can buy nitrogen and pour it on there, and then your plants are living off of humans. But if you have hugelkultur, you've got nitrogen from the air, and the microbial situation down there is they're all happy eating each other and doing rhizophagy with the roots. And that it also retains moisture when you have that porous wood down there. We've done some bee blocks with the native bees, and it's been fun to study the bees. And here are some cocoons from bees. There's leaf cutter bee here. See the leaves, and so we've the bees used to put their cocoons in my electrical outlets in the grounding hole, and I was like, and then when I'd plug in a tool or a cord, I'd get sparks, and I just thought, gosh darn, these bees need a home, they need a place to do their thing, and so I started making bee blocks. So I did that for a number of years, but then I find that the bee blocks, the predators, it's like a smorgasbord for cuckoo bees and bee predators, and so all of a sudden I'm creating like a little bee deli for the predators. And so I don't know if it's healthier to do that or not. It's fun to do it for fun and for science and to do bee identification. Um, but the other thing that happened last year is the university students, these four ladies did a capstone project where they created biochar and they wanted to do an experiment for their senior project. And so this is a biochar incinerator where you can put a air pump on top and on the bottom, and you fill it with wood chips. And what they did is they ran both of these this would push air in and this would suck air out, and they dried out the wood chips. And then when it came to do the fire, it would burn from the top down, and uh, the results would be uh, biochar. And so ideally, you take this char, so you've got all this charcoal, and you inoculate it with some indigenous microorganisms. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit here. This is what we call, it's Korean natural farming. And what we do is we get a bucket of rainwater. We get a handful of the best soil you can find. You get a handful of wood chips, rotted wood chips. You get a handful of leaf mold from the bottom of the leaf pile. And then you steam about 4 or 5 potatoes. And you put them in the bucket and you squish the potatoes to release all the starch. And if the temperature is around 70, 72 degrees, in 1 or 2 days, you'll have a big thick foam on there because all the microorganisms are multiplying so fast. And that is the prime time to take a little scoop of that material and you put it in a gallon of water, and then you flood your plant, your root zone with that, and you're taking local microorganisms from your land and you're putting it in your pots or on your plants to get microscopic bacterias, fungi, nematodes, and well, anyway, you're introducing those, and you flood the root zone with those, and the roots will have a healthy supply of local microbes, and then they can begin the process of rhizophagy, where the microorganisms interact with the roots. The roots make sugars from the sun, and the microbes want that, and the roots will give them sugars, and the microbes will bring nutrients, and there's an exchange that happens down there. And you'll wonder sometimes, why does a plant do really good over here and not over here? Well, it could be that your soil microbiome is different in two different places. And so we can actually introduce our local microbes to our plants. And so this is what we do instead of fertilizer. Now, I did take some comfrey leaves and put them in there. You take a little bit of sea salt because that's got the minerals in there. And you basically make this tea. The other thing we do at Keystone Flora is we collect spores, and we take a container similar to this. I'll take the peat moss and I'll sterilize it. I'll boil it and put a lid on it, keep it very sterile, get it into a clean container of some kind, and put a lid on it. And then we collect the spores, and you can take the spores and tap that on there. And in a little while, you'll have green little gametophytes forming. And then after a while, you'll have little leaves come up, and there'll be roots on there, and you can propagate your own ferns. And so we've been doing about 6 different species of ferns, not for commercial use, but this is a hobby. But I did create 100 ebony spleenworts last year. I'm real proud of. I don't have a picture of them, but here we got Christmas fern and sensitive fern, and we've done like 6 different kinds. The other thing we do at Keystone Flora is some cover crop. I'm playing with cover crops to try to get that to change the microbial biome of the weeds to a healthier biome. I want to get rid of the weeds are very good about keeping other things at bay. Another reason why our seeds don't work too well is because we have to deal with microbial populations that are geared towards weeds. Well, I'm trying to transfer some of that energy, that microbial into a cover crop, which I prefer rather than mowing. And I can grow my own mulch, and I can reduce my mowing, and I can also make a lot of flowers that'll feed a lot of insects. And then it's also pollinator friendly. Okay, invasive species. Do I need to talk about those? Very briefly. We have a lot of them. Ohio Invasive Plant Council is top notch. They've actually gotten the state to ban the Callery pear, Bradford pear, which took years. And they work with the nursery industry instead of against the nursery industry. And these are some of the invasive species that I've got personal relationships with, because this is what we kill every year. And when we do volunteer events, we're usually working on these kinds of things. Honeysuckle has taken over southern Ohio, well, southwest Ohio. But I've seen this all the way to St. Louis. It's just all everywhere. English ivy, everybody lets it grow up all their trees. It's horrible. This is the tree of heaven. This is where the spotted lanternfly is. No, spotted lanternfly. Yeah, spotted lanternfly is in Cincinnati now, coming to your area soon. That's their favorite tree, the Atlantis. Yeah. So, yeah, that's porcelain berry. It's like kudzu. I think you're familiar with kudzu. We don't really have kudzu in Cincinnati. I know of 3 populations, but we have our own kudzu-like plant, and that's porcelain berry, which is uh, Brevin pedunculata, Ampelopsis Brevin pedunculata. There's the hammer honeysuckle. Tim, I asked you about false aloe. If you guys have the Manfreda virginica, this is the flower that I had this year from that plant. I just wanted to share that. I'm really proud of this. That's about 6 feet tall
Oh,
and just absolutely gorgeous. I don't have any better pictures of it to share with you, but the bottom, it's just got the leaves are down low, and then they've showed up these stalks, and these are the flowers.
okay. False aloe, is that what you're calling it?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's one of the names of it. Yeah. And here's our wild hydrangea that we grow at the nursery. That's the hydrangea arborescens. And the wood poppy is one of our, could be the most popular plant in the nursery over 20 years. And that's a spring ephemeral, and it grows very easily, flowers a long time. And this has paid the bills. This one plant has really done well for us. And if we spend more time outdoors, we can see all that love that's around us. And I wanted to show you the Cecropia moths that we had emerge. The female emerged on these stalks, and the next day the male found her, and they mated all day long. And here are some stick bugs mating. There's the male and the female mating right there. So look at the disguise they have. You would just never see that. So that's a rare time there. So there's love everywhere out there. And thanks for listening to my talk, you guys. That's it.
Thank you, Steve. That was excellent. We do have a couple of questions. We have some questions in the chat. We're at let's see, we're at 7:33. I think we're a little over, but that's okay. Let's see. Terry asked, can we get written instructions somewhere for that Korean method? Is it good for native orchids?
Uh, I would think it's good for everything. Uh, I mean, if you want them to grow, well, it depends on where your orchid comes from. I am not an orchid person at all. Uh, I know people that are, and I don't think you can hurt anything by introducing um, indigenous microorganisms. So let me back this up to that chart. So there's this guy, um, Korean natural farming, Dr. Cho is, they do this commercially in Korea. I mean, they make giant batches of indigenous microorganism solution for their plantings. So Korean natural farming, indigenous microorganisms. This gentleman, Chris Trump, has an academia nursery in Hawaii, and he took a class with Dr. Cho, and he's got some excellent videos. So if you write down this name, Chris Trump. Now, Chris Trump has a series. So the version I showed you was the simplest tea to nurture your your microorganisms. Now they can take that and they can do it with rice in the forest, and they can grow fungus, and they can take that and they can add molasses to it, and they can make a thing that has shelf life. And so there's a whole series of different kind of IMOs you could do.
Hmm.
So to find that simple version is what I would recommend. That's what we do. And a lot of people use teas. They grind up weeds and things, and they'll make a tea, and everybody swears by that. I use the Russian comfrey because it's full of minerals, and the uh, blanking on it right now. The sticky one, the one people use it for tea. Well, anyway, another plant that people use. It's an edible. Um,
Let's see. And Terry also asked, she said, I recently put some collected seeds in pots and buried the pots in my raised beds used for vegetables. Should I net them? And she asks also, I used garden soil. Does that lower my propagation chances?
means store-bought garden soil. Um, well, um, it's all about you know, your the stuff you're using. In our nursery, I I I buy a dump truck full of shredded topsoil, and we add um, perlite and peat moss to it and wood chips, and that's what we grow our plants in. But it turns out that, well, peat moss is sterile. Our shredded topsoil has plastic over it for a couple of years, and so it's not moist. It's very few microorganisms in it. So we're kind of starting with a kind of a sterile mix.
This
So
wasn't this wasn't sterile. It actually is garden soil that I regularly put compost in.
well, I would put a net over it to keep birds and mice and other leaves from falling in there, and other seeds from blowing in there in the wind.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Um, let's see. We are yes, we're a little over, and this was terrific, Steve. I was having been there. I I I can see I can see the areas where I walked through, and it's really more impressive in real life. But those meadow gardens are amazing, and the information was terrific. So I want to thank you for doing this for us. I'm going to turn off the recording. Um, at this point, if people want to stay for a few minutes and have more questions, that's fine.